since Grandpa's gone, it's time for you to move out, Granny. We need the house now." Liam said it like he was discussing weekend plans, not shoving his own grandmother out of the home I'd built over half a century. Chloe just nodded, twirling her wedding ring like my life was some minor paperwork they'd already filed away. The fork trembled in my hand as I stared across the dining table. It had been 8 days since Walter's funeral. 8 days of silence, casseroles, and the kind of shallow hugs people give when they're just waiting for you to disappear. My grandchildren, the ones Walter and I raised after their parents passed, were sitting in my dining room, our dining room, plotting my eviction like a business merger. Liam leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. "Joe," he said, dropping the granny he used when he wanted something, "this house is too much for you now. It's old, big, drafty. You're 72. You shouldn't be rattling around here alone." "Rattling around," I repeated, the word sour on my tongue. Chloe wouldn't meet my eyes. Her voice was soft but rehearsed. "We just want what's best for you, Grandma. There's this nice senior community in Dayton. You'd love it. Bingo nights, garden clubs. It's perfect." Perfect. That word hit like a slap. This house had held our Christmas mornings, Walter's woodworking projects, the porch swings he built with his hands. Perfect wasn't some sanitized apartment with linoleum floors and activities. "And where?" I asked carefully, setting my fork down. "Do you expect me to live while you two enjoy this house?" Liam leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was being reasonable. "We'd sell it. Get you a little apartment. Something manageable. You don't need all this space. We do." I felt the old oak floor beneath my feet, the one Walter refinished by hand, and something cold started settling in my chest. "And if I say no?" He didn't even hesitate. "Then we'll have to make some hard choices. You can't stay here forever, Granny. It's not practical. Besides, the house isn't really yours anyway. It'll be ours eventually. Might as well make the transition now." Walter's chair sat empty beside me. If he'd heard that, he'd have slammed his fist on the table. But he was gone, and they thought that meant my spine had gone with him. "Now that Grandpa's dead," Liam continued, casually carving his roast chicken, "you should grieve, pack up your things, and move on." The room went silent. The only sound was the slow tick of the wall clock above the fireplace. Chloe sipped her wine like nothing monumental had just been said. Something in me didn't break that night. It crystallized. All the softness I'd shown those two, the bedtime stories, the birthday cakes, the bailouts, the tuition payments, hardened into something sharp and clear. I stood up slowly. My legs didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. "I see," I said. 2 words. That was all. 2 words holding 52 years of love, decades of sacrifice, and one unforgettable betrayal. Their faces relaxed, thinking I was surrendering. Liam even smiled. "We'll help you look at places tomorrow," he said smugly. I didn't answer. I just slipped on Walter's old coat, walked out the front door, and felt the cold Ohio air bite my cheeks. Behind me, their laughter floated faintly through the windows, warm and careless. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought wrong. That night, I sat in Walter's study, my study now, with a cup of black coffee and the quiet hum of the furnace. I opened the filing cabinet he'd built with his own hands. Every mortgage statement, every co-signed document, every financial favor to those two was neatly labeled. College funds, car loans, down payment for Chloe's house, business startup for Liam's construction company. One by one, I laid the papers across the desk. They told a story more honest than any family promise. And as I read, the shape of my revenge began to form, cold, methodical, unstoppable. They thought they were taking a house. What they didn't know was that they'd just walked into a game I'd spent a lifetime mastering. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan Walter installed back in '92, listening to the soft hum of the motor and the louder churn of my thoughts. By sunrise, the pain of their betrayal had cooled into something far more dangerous. Focus. I dressed like I used to when Walter and I ran our small hardware business. Navy sweater, slacks, hair pulled back tight. Not the soft, shuffling grandmother they thought I was. No, this was the woman who balanced books down to the penny, who signed contracts, who negotiated supplier credit when the economy tanked. At 8:15 a.m. sharp, I pulled into Maple Grove Community Bank in downtown Springfield. I'd been a client there for over 30 years. I knew every teller, every manager, every hallway. Retirement didn't erase relationships. It just made people forget how sharp your memory still is. "Joanne Walker," the receptionist said, eyes lighting up when she saw me. "It's been a while. How are you holding up?" "One day at a time," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "I need to speak to someone about a few accounts. Co-signed loans. It's urgent." Within 20 minutes, I was seated in the office of Megan Porter, a senior loan officer I'd watched grow from teller to department head. She brought me coffee, placed a hand on mine, and said softly, "I was so sorry to hear about Walter. He was one of the good ones." "Yes," I whispered. "He was." Then I straightened. "I need to understand my financial exposure. My grandchildren, Liam and Chloe. I co-signed some things for them years ago. I need full details." Megan's professional face clicked into place. "Of course. Do you have their full names and birth dates?" I handed her a list. Walter and I had been meticulous record keepers. She typed for a while, the quiet tapping of keys filling the office. Then her eyebrows started to lift. Slowly. Higher. "Well," she said carefully, "since you co-signed on Chloe's mortgage and Liam's business loan, I can tell you this much. Chloe's house is 2 months behind on payments, and there's also a home equity line of credit drawn 6 months ago." I blinked. "Home equity line?" She turned the screen slightly toward me. 45,000 maxed out. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "And Liam," she hesitated, "the construction equipment loan you co-signed defaulted 4 months ago. 76,000 in principal, plus interest and penalties. Total liability exposure, around $120,000, give or take." I stared at the tidy columns of numbers on her screen. Years of gifts, bailouts, and co-signatures. They hadn't just leaned on me. They'd built their entire financial lives on my back and then had the audacity to tell me to pack my bags. "And Chloe's mortgage?" I asked quietly. 60 days delinquent. If they miss another payment, foreclosure proceedings could begin within 90 days. I nodded slowly. Every word landed with precision, not shock. It wasn't grief anymore. It was data. Ammunition. "Megan," I said finally, "I'll need full documentation, payment histories, loan details, every note with my signature on it, for legal purposes." She didn't ask why. She just said, "Of course, Joe," and started printing. By the time I left the bank, the Ohio sun was glaring off the icy pavement, bright and unflinching. I sat in my car with the document spread across the passenger seat. Liam's construction company, Riverbend Contracting, LLC, was hanging by a thread. Chloe's dream house was 2 steps from foreclosure, and every thread that held them together ran straight through me. They thought I'd just move into some bingo-filled senior apartment while they cashed out my life's work. They had no idea how exposed they were. That afternoon, I called Richard Blake, an old friend of Walter's who'd practiced estate law for 40 years. We hadn't spoken in months, but the moment he heard my voice, he cleared his schedule. "Joe," he said warmly, "what can I do for you?" "I need to understand what happens," I said, "if the people you co-signed for start sinking. Legally, financially, all of it." There was a pause. then a quiet chuckle. "Something tells me Liam and Chloe are in trouble." "You have no idea," I replied. We met in his office at 3 p.m. By 4:30, I'd learned exactly how Ohio law protected guarantors like me. The right to demand full accounting, to initiate legal actions to protect assets, to refuse further liability if the borrowers concealed debts. Richard leaned back in his chair and looked at me the way Walter used to when I was about to do something bold. "Joe," he said slowly, "what are you planning?" I smiled thinly. "Nothing illegal, just pruning." He laughed. "Pruning?" "Walter always said the roses grew best when you cut the diseased branches. Liam and Chloe have become a tangle of weeds." I left with a folder of legal references and a quiet fire building in my chest. By evening, I was back in the study, spreading everything across the desk like a battlefield map. Loan defaults, missed payments, bankruptcy filings, hidden credit lines. They'd built their lives on my name. Now I'd use my name to take it all apart. By Wednesday morning, I had their entire financial skeleton laid out across Walter's old drafting table. Every loan, every missed payment, every signature they'd begged me to place beside theirs. It looked less like family paperwork and more like a map of vulnerabilities. Walter used to say, "Never start pruning until you know which branches feed the disease." I now knew every root and every weak point. The next move was simple: information pressure. I drove to Brooklyn Street Cafe, a quiet little place in downtown Springfield where I used to meet Walter every Friday after bookkeeping. It wasn't just for coffee. It was a crossroads for people who worked in banking, insurance, and real estate. I'd spent decades quietly listening in that cafe, learning how things move in this town. People forget grandmothers once ran businesses too. Margaret, a senior officer from First Midwest Bank, spotted me immediately. "Joe Walker," she said, sliding into the booth with a steaming latte. "How on earth are you? I heard about Walter. I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I said softly. "It's been quiet around the house." We talked for a few minutes about weather and grandkids, the polite warm-up that Midwesterners never skip. Then I steered the conversation. "Margaret, have you had any recent loan applications from a Liam Walker or a Chloe Sanders?" Her eyebrows rose. "As a matter of fact, yes, 2 applications in the last week. Both declined." "For what?" I asked. "Emergency personal loans. Their debt-to-income ratio is a mess, 60%, maybe more. Liam's construction company filed for business bankruptcy last month, didn't it?" I feigned mild surprise. "Oh dear, I didn't know." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Joe, between us, no bank in Springfield is going to touch them now, not without a very qualified co-signer." A qualified co-signer. I didn't have to ask who she meant. My name had been their ticket through every locked door. Without it, the world wasn't quite so kind. I thanked her, paid for both coffees, and left with something far more valuable than caffeine: confirmation. They'd already started scrambling. Back home, I opened my laptop and logged into the credit monitoring service I kept for all accounts tied to my name. I'd set it up years ago to protect Walter and me from fraud. Now it gave me a front row seat to their growing desperation. 3 loan applications, all denied. 2 new credit card inquiries, declined. 1 home equity extension request, rejected. Every rejection shaved a few more points off their credit scores. Every failed attempt made the next one even less likely to succeed. It was a slow, quiet kind of panic, the kind that starts like a hairline crack in glass. Thursday morning, I took a drive past Liam's construction site on the outskirts of town. From the street, I watched him pacing near a half-finished foundation, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, the stress was pouring off him. His foreman approached twice. Both conversations ended with Liam waving him off like a man holding a sinking boat, together with duct tape. Good. The following day, I scheduled a quick lunch with Helen Marsh, an old acquaintance from the county's business licensing department. Over a tuna sandwich, I casually mentioned Riverbend Contracting LLC. Helen gave a little sigh. "Oh, Liam's company? It's on thin ice. Missed safety documentation twice in the last month. If they miss again, the county will have to halt their current project. One insurance lapse and they're done." I raised my eyebrows just enough. "That sounds serious." "It is. He's young, cocky. Thinks deadlines are suggestions. But the inspectors have been watching him." By the time I finished my sandwich, I'd learned exactly how fragile Liam's business was. Late safety filings, unpaid premiums, a backlog of subcontractor invoices. The company wasn't a ticking time bomb, it was already sparking. And I didn't have to light the match. All I had to do was make sure the right people paid attention. That evening, I drafted a very polite email to an old family friend in the local safety compliance office. Nothing accusatory, just a friendly note. I came across some public records from Riverbend Contracting that concern me. Permit delays, incomplete safety plans. I thought you might want to take a closer look. I'd hate to see any corners cut that could put workers at risk. I attached copies of the documents I'd gathered, all public, all accurate, all very, very damning in the right hands. By Monday, Liam's company would be getting a surprise inspection, and if Helen was right, they wouldn't pass. I sat in Walter's armchair that night, watching the late autumn wind rattle the bare branches outside. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to calm. They thought I'd be gone by now. Instead, I was watching their little empire crack from the inside. The best part? I hadn't said a single word to them yet. By the time the weekend rolled around, the quiet cracks I'd opened in their lives started widening like ice under spring melt. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger after that first nudge. Their own choices did the rest. Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Chloe used to sit on the counter, swinging her little legs while Walter flipped pancakes. The sunlight hit the table just right, and for a moment I almost forgot what they'd said to me that night. But then my phone buzzed, and the spell broke. New credit alert. Emergency loan inquiry denied. New credit alert. Auto refinance application declined. They were scrambling. Desperation has a rhythm. Quick, repetitive, sloppy. I'd seen it plenty of times when Walter and I ran the hardware store. People made bold promises when the bills came due, then panicked when no one believed them anymore. By Tuesday, the county inspection I'd quietly set in motion had done its work. I parked my car down the street from Liam's construction site under the guise of picking up mulch from a garden supply store nearby. From where I sat, I had a perfect view of the chaos. 2 county inspectors in hard hats walked the perimeter, clipboards in hand. Liam followed them, his gestures jerky and defensive. His foreman looked like he wanted to disappear into the gravel. I couldn't hear their words, but I could read Liam's body language perfectly. A mixture of charm attempts, excuses, and finally, raw frustration. By the time the inspectors left, his shoulders were slumped, his face pale. He kicked the dirt when he thought no one was looking. That night, I got another alert. Business insurance lapse notice filed. Riverbend Contracting LLC. 1 late payment away from forced suspension. I allowed myself a single quiet smile. Not cruel, just satisfied. But the real storm broke on Thursday morning. I was folding laundry in the living room, ordinary, quiet, when I heard it. Chloe's voice. Not in my house. Across the street. It carried down the block through the crisp Ohio air, sharp and panicked. She was standing in her driveway, cell phone pressed to her ear, pacing in her slippers. "No, Mom, I'm telling you." "We need help now," she said, her voice breaking. "The mortgage company called again. If we don't catch up in 2 weeks, they'll start foreclosure. Liam lost another contract. It's falling apart. No, I don't know what to do." She stopped pacing, pressed her hand against her forehead, and whispered something that I couldn't catch. But the way she said it, it wasn't the voice of a woman in control. It was the voice of a child who just realized the adults weren't coming to fix things anymore. Later that afternoon, as I returned from the grocery store, I saw Liam loading a flat-screen TV and a few boxes into the back of his truck. Chloe was standing on the porch, arms folded, eyes red. They didn't see me. I didn't make a sound, but I watched. People show you who they really are when the pressure hits. Liam wasn't strategizing. He was pawning things, quick fixes, temporary bandages for a gaping wound. Friday brought a different kind of knock at my door. Chloe. Her makeup was smudged, her voice shaky. "Grandma, can we talk?" I didn't let the softness in her voice fool me. I'd heard that exact tone when she wanted me to co-sign her mortgage. "Of course," I said pleasantly, stepping aside. "Come in." She sat at the kitchen table, fiddling with her scarf. "I know things have been tense," she began. "Liam's under a lot of stress with the business, and the house payments. Well, we're just in a rough patch." Rough patch. That was one way to describe financial freefall. She leaned forward, trying for sincerity. "We just need a little help, just until we can catch up. $15,000 should cover the mortgage and get us through the next month." I stirred my tea slowly. "And how would you pay that back?" She blinked. "Well, once the business gets going again." I raised a hand gently. "Chloe, I co-signed your mortgage. I gave you the down payment for that house. Walter and I covered college. I'm not a bank." Her face flushed. I know. But we're family. You always said family takes care of family." I looked her dead in the eye. Family also doesn't order their grandmother to pack her bags 8 days after her husband's funeral. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tears welled up. "I didn't mean it like that. Liam," I didn't flinch. "I heard you. I heard both of you." The silence between us stretched taut, almost humming. She finally whispered, "Please, just this once." "No," I said simply. No explanation, no softness, just the word she wasn't used to hearing from me. She left a few minutes later, shoulders hunched, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She didn't slam the door. That would have required defiance. What I saw was something else entirely, the first crack in their illusion of control. That night, sitting in Walter's armchair, I thought about what had just happened. She'd come expecting the same old Granny Joe, the one who bailed them out with warm hugs and signed checks. But that woman was buried with Walter. The one who remained was something they'd never accounted for, a woman who knew exactly where every financial lever was and wasn't afraid to pull them. The following week began with the kind of quiet that only comes before a storm. The sky over Springfield was flat and gray, the air sharp. Walter used to say Ohio winters didn't just freeze the ground, they froze time. And in that stillness, you could hear everything breaking if you listened close enough. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. My phone buzzed. Credit alert. Mortgage. Acceleration clause. Triggered. Full balance due. Foreclosure proceedings pending. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and poured myself another cup of coffee. Outside, frost clung to the rose bushes Walter planted decades ago. Chloe had once played beneath those same bushes, wearing a plastic tiara and asking me if I thought real princesses had grandmas. I'd laughed and said, "Of course they do." Now, that same little girl was facing the consequences of building her castle on borrowed sand. By mid-morning, I drove past their neighborhood, not because I had to, because I wanted to see. Liam's truck was parked in the driveway, hood up, engine steaming in the cold. Chloe stood beside it in her work coat, talking on the phone. Her voice carried through the thin, icy air. "I don't care what it costs," she said sharply. "Just get it running. He needs the truck for work." I parked at the small park across the street, pretending to read the newspaper while I watched. Walter and I used to bring the grandkids here to feed ducks when they were little. It felt poetic, in a way, to sit here again. Same bench, different story. Around 11:30, Liam came home unexpectedly early. He slammed the truck door, marched up the porch steps, and threw his gloves down with enough force to echo. Chloe followed him inside, the front door left slightly ajar. I didn't want to eavesdrop, I didn't have to. Their argument spilled into the street like a radio turned up too loud. "You said the job was secure," Chloe's voice cracked. "You promised me we'd catch up." "I had the job," Liam snapped back, "until the county shut the site down. They're saying insurance lapses, safety violations. None of this would have happened if the inspectors hadn't shown up early. Early. He had no idea I'd been the one who sent that polite little email. Well, maybe if you'd paid the bills on time instead of buying that new truck." "That truck was for the business," he shouted. Their voices tangled, climbing over each other. Blame, panic, resentment. It was the kind of argument that doesn't end. It just pauses when someone gets tired. By the time Chloe stormed back onto the porch, her face was blotchy and her phone was already in her hand. She started dialing. Probably her sister in Columbus, or maybe an old friend. Desperate people always have a rotation. Over the next 3 days, I kept watch without ever stepping in. More loan inquiries popped up in my credit alerts. More denials followed. Each one chipped away at their already fragile credit. Thursday, a notice arrived in my mailbox from the bank. Cosigner alert. Chloe and Liam had applied for a bridge loan against my credit line. Denied. They were throwing stones in a glass house, and every throw was ricocheting back at them. Friday morning brought the real break. It started with Chloe showing up at my door again, unannounced, wrapped in a thick parka, hair pulled back like she'd run out the door mid-argument. "Grandma," she said breathlessly, "I need your help, please." I let her in. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. A normal morning for me, a last stand for her. She sat down, wringing her gloves between her hands. "The mortgage company's giving us less than 2 weeks. Liam's insurance got canceled. He can't take new jobs until it's reinstated. And," her voice cracked, "I found out about his business debts. All of it. $70-something thousand. He never told me." There it was, the fracture line. She covered her face with her hands and started to cry. Not the pretty, manipulative tears from the last visit. These were raw, exhausted sobs. He lied to me. He lied about everything. I slid a box of tissues across the table but said nothing. She needed to talk, and I needed to listen. She looked up at me. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You're the only person who can help us. Please, Grandma, we'll lose everything. The house, the company, our marriage. Liam's falling apart and I—" She broke off with a shaky breath. I don't know what to do anymore. I kept my voice calm, measured. "Have you considered downsizing? Selling the house? Living within your means?" She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "We can't sell the house. It's all we have." I tilted my head. "Is it, though? Or is it just the last thing you haven't lost yet?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Not just as Grandma, but as someone who wouldn't play the savior anymore. After she left, I stood at the kitchen window, watching her cross the street. Liam was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The moment she stepped up the stairs, they started again. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the posture. This wasn't teamwork anymore. This was survival mode, each blaming the other for the fire they'd both started. That night, as the wind howled outside and the old furnace hummed steadily, I opened my laptop and reviewed everything. foreclosure timelines, business shutdown notices, insurance lapses, credit declines, marital cracks. It was all there, a slow-motion collapse playing out in real time. Walter used to say revenge was beneath him. I smiled faintly at his picture on the mantel. "I know Walt," I whispered, "but justice? That's another story." I closed the laptop. The stage was almost set. By the time the second week of December rolled in, Springfield was wrapped in a bitter cold that clung to the bones. Walter used to say you could tell who'd prepared for winter and who hadn't by the way people walked, steady or hurried. Chloe and Liam were starting to walk like people who'd run out of warmth. Monday morning, I got a letter from Maple Grove Community Bank. Notice to co-signer. Loan default status approaching threshold. Immediate review recommended. They were circling the drain faster than even I expected. I spent that afternoon at the Springfield Public Library, tucked in my usual corner near the records section. Walter always called it my command center. Rows of wooden shelves, the smell of old paper, quiet humming radiators. It was my kind of place. Riverbend Contracting LLC left a paper trail longer than the Miami River. Permit delays, late insurance filings, subcontractor liens. It was all public information if you knew where to look, and I did. I printed the most damaging pages, unpaid invoices, insurance notices, a report showing they were behind on workers' compensation premiums. Then, with deliberate care, I emailed those documents to 3 contacts. 1, the county safety office with a polite note about public interest in construction safety compliance. 2, an old acquaintance at Liam's bonding company, simply asking if they were aware of Riverbend's outstanding obligations. 3, Margaret at First Midwest, attaching the lien records with a short message. Thought you might find this relevant if new applications come across your desk. I never made accusations. I didn't need to. People in financial institutions are like bloodhounds. They follow the scent of risk without being told. Tuesday brought the first tremor. Chloe called mid-morning. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. Her voice was tight, brittle. "Grandma, please call me. Something happened with Liam's bonding company. They're suspending his coverage. We can't take any new contracts. I don't know what to do." I didn't call back. That evening, I sat by the front window, the house lit softly, the old furnace humming. Across the street, their house looked dark except for the kitchen. Liam was pacing again. Chloe sat at the table, hands in her hair. From this distance, their silhouettes looked like 2 people who'd built a fortress on ice and heard it cracking underneath them. Wednesday, I met with Richard Blake, my attorney friend again. This time, I brought everything: bank notices, credit alerts, foreclosure letters, lien printouts. He scanned each page carefully, nodding occasionally. "Joe," he said finally, "you've built a cleaner case file than some law firms." "Habit," I replied. He leaned back. "Legally, you're in a strong position. They concealed debts, failed to notify you of additional loans, defaulted on co-signed obligations. Under Ohio statute, you can withdraw your guarantees and protect your assets. You can also demand full repayment or dissolution." I smiled faintly. "Good, I'm not done yet." That night, I drafted 2 letters, one to the mortgage company, one to the bank, both formally revoking co-signer responsibility due to concealment of material debts and fraudulent emissions. Richard reviewed them the next morning and said they were as sharp as any attorney could have written. Thursday, I sent them by certified mail. The moment those letters landed in official hands, the clock started ticking. The mortgage company would no longer expect me to save Chloe. The bank would stop viewing me as a safety net for Liam. Their financial lifelines were about to snap, cleanly and legally. Friday afternoon, as the snow began to fall, Chloe showed up at my door again. No makeup, puffy eyes. Her voice was shaky but determined. "Why are you doing this?" she asked before I could even invite her in. Liam's bonding company froze everything. The bank won't return our calls. The mortgage company said you withdrew your guarantee. What's happening? I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. You told me to pack my bags and move on, remember? That was Liam, she said desperately. I didn't mean it like that. You nodded. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes. We're drowning, Grandma. I held her gaze. I know. You could fix this, she whispered. Yes, I said evenly. I could. But why would I? The silence that followed wasn't the awkward kind. It was the heavy, painful kind that drops between people who suddenly realize the bridge they burned isn't coming back. She started crying again, quiet this time, like someone who finally ran out of strategies. We were stupid, she said. Liam thought, we both thought. She trailed off. You thought kindness meant weakness, I said softly. You mistook love for obligation. You stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. She didn't argue. She just stood there, snow melting on her boots, shivering in the doorway. I almost felt something stir in my chest then, something like pity. But then I remembered Walter's chair sitting empty. I remembered the dinner table, the words. Now that Grandpa's gone, I let the moment pass. Chloe, go home, I said gently. Figure out who you are when no one's holding you up. She left without another word. That night, as snow blanketed the neighborhood, I sat in the quiet house surrounded by documents, legal letters, and memories. It wasn't joy I felt. It was clarity. Walter always used to handle problems like a craftsman, carefully, step by step. And that's exactly what I'd done. They thought they were cutting me out. Instead, I'd quietly remove myself from their collapsing structure, leaving them to face the full weight of their choices. The end game was coming. They just didn't know it yet. The snow kept falling through the night, soft and steady, burying the sidewalks and muting the world outside. By Saturday morning, Springfield looked like a postcard. Bright white lawns, chimney smoke drifting lazily into a pale sky. But beneath that calm, the storm I'd quietly set in motion was peaking. It started at 9:12 a.m. with a frantic knocking on my door. I opened it to find both of them, Chloe and Liam, standing on my porch. She wore a heavy coat, cheeks red from the cold. He looked exhausted, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. It was the first time they'd stood side by side on my doorstep since that night at the dinner table. "Grandma," Chloe said softly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, wordless. They walked into the warm kitchen like strangers in a foreign land, their boots dripping onto the mat Walter used to clean every night without fail. I took my usual seat at the head of the kitchen table. They sat across from me, perched like two school children waiting for the principal's verdict. Walter's chair, as always, remained empty at my right. Liam spoke first. "Look, I know things have been tense," he began, trying to soften his voice, "but this situation is serious. My bonding company froze my accounts. The county shut down my site. The mortgage company is breathing down our necks. We can't get loans. We can't refinance. We can't even get a line of credit." His voice was calmer than I expected, but there was a thread of panic underneath, like a rope starting to fray. Chloe leaned in, hands clasped tightly. "Grandma, we're out of options. We've tried everything. If we don't find $40,000 in the next 2 weeks, we lose everything. The house, the company. Liam's truck is already up for repossession. We can't survive this without help." I folded my hands on the table. "And why?" I asked slowly. "Should that help come from me?" Chloe swallowed. "Because you're family." I let out a short, humorless laugh. Ah, family, I remember that word. You used it the night you told me to pack up my life and leave my home because it wasn't practical anymore. Liam shifted in his chair. That was a mistake, he said quickly. I was stressed. Grieving hit everyone differently. I shouldn't have said it like that. I tilted my head. No, you shouldn't have said it at all, and you shouldn't have meant it either. For the first time since this began, Liam looked away. He stared at the table like it might give him a script. Chloe's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. I'd learned long ago that silence is a weapon when wielded by someone who isn't afraid of it. They fidgeted, shifted, exchanged desperate glances. Then Chloe broke. Grandma, please. I know we hurt you. I know what we said was wrong, but everything is falling apart. We've tried loans, credit lines, even talking to Liam's old business partners. No one will touch us. Everyone keeps saying the same thing. Your grandmother's not backing you anymore. It's like the second you stepped away, the whole town turned its back. I met her eyes. That's because for years, your name meant nothing. Mine carried the weight. Without it, you're just another pair of overextended borrowers with bad payment histories. Liam's composure cracked then. We know, he snapped, pounding his fist lightly on the table. We screwed up, okay? We screwed up. But this is our lives on the line. We can fix this if you just give us one last chance. Fix it, I repeated. How? Another loan? Another line of credit? Another promise you can't keep? He opened his mouth but had no answer. You built your lives, I continued, on a house you didn't pay for, a business you mismanaged, and my signature. And when Walter died, you looked at me not as a person, but as an obstacle to remove. You didn't just ask me to move out. You expected me to, like I was a piece of old furniture in the way of your plans. Chloe broke then. The tears came, real and unrestrained. I was scared, she whispered. After Grandpa died, everything felt so fragile. Liam was pushing. I didn't know how to say no. I thought it was the smart thing to do. I didn't let her off the hook. You nodded, Chloe. That was all it took. She buried her face in her hands. Liam reached out to touch her shoulder, but she jerked away. For the first time, cracks appeared between them. Not just financially, but emotionally. I leaned forward. Tell me exactly what you want. They exchanged a look. Chloe wiped her eyes. $40,000, she said. That would cover the mortgage arrears and give us breathing room to restart the business. We'd sign whatever you want. We'd pay you back. Please, Grandma. $40,000. It wasn't a small amount, but it was nothing compared to what I'd already given over the years. College tuition, down payments, business bailouts, hundreds of thousands that had never seen their way back to me. I stood slowly and walked to the window, looking out at Walter's rose bushes blanketed in snow. He'd always trimmed them carefully in winter, cutting away the dead parts so spring could bring new blooms. That memory felt sharper now. You're not here because you've changed, I said without turning. You're here because you've run out of options. That's not the same thing. Chloe's voice cracked. Then tell us what to do. We'll do anything. I turned back to them. Anything? They both nodded. Finally. The moment I'd been waiting for. I sat back down. Then here are my terms, I said evenly, and you'd better listen carefully. They sat there, wide-eyed and shivering slightly from the cold still clinging to their coats, waiting for me to speak. It struck me how different this was from that night at the dinner table. Back then, they'd spoken like landlords addressing a tenant. Now they looked like defendants waiting for a verdict. I clasped my hands together slowly. Here's how this is going to work. If I decide to help you, it won't be out of pity. It won't be because you said please. It will be on my terms. Every single one. Do you understand? Chloe nodded quickly. Liam hesitated, jaw tightening, but he nodded too. They didn't have any other cards left to play. Good, I said. Let's start with the first term, public acknowledgement. They exchanged confused glances. You're going to write a formal apology, I continued. A public letter, posted to your social media accounts and submitted to the neighborhood newsletter. It will state in plain words that the way you treated me after Walter's death was cruel, disrespectful, and wrong. You will acknowledge that your financial situation is the result of your own mismanagement, not mine, and you will apologize for attempting to push me out of my own home. Liam's head snapped up. What? That's humiliating. Yes, I said calmly. It is, and it should be. You humiliated me when you told me to pack my bags and leave the house Walter and I built. You made a spectacle of my grief at that dinner table. Now, the same community that heard the whispers about Grandma moving out will hear the truth from you. This isn't negotiable. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. We'll do it. Liam glared at her. Chloe. She turned to him, voice shaking but firm. We don't have a choice. I waited until he met my eyes again. That's term 1. I raised a single finger. Term 2, respect. Going forward, I am not your co-signer, your emergency fund, or your afterthought. I am the matriarch of this family. You will address me with the respect that title deserves. That means no more condescending suggestions about senior living, no more behind-my-back maneuvering, and no more decisions about my house without my involvement. If that's too much for either of you, this conversation ends now. Liam's defiance wavered under my stare. Eventually, he muttered, Fine. Term 3, conditions on any financial assistance. I leaned forward, letting each word land. If I provide funds, it will not be $40,000. I'm prepared to offer $25,000, enough to halt the foreclosure and give you breathing room, but not enough to restore the lifestyle that got you into this mess. Liam frowned. That's not enough to cover everything. That, I said, is the point. You will learn the difference between survival and comfort. You will rebuild, not resume. Chloe's hands were shaking. What would the $25,000 cover? I've already spoken with my attorney, I said. If you accept, the money will go into an escrow account. It will be released directly to the mortgage company, not to you. You will sign legal agreements outlining repayment terms and giving me collateral rights to your house if you default again. You will also submit monthly financial statements to my lawyer for the next 2 years. Any lies, omissions, or delays, and the deal is void. Liam opened his mouth to object, but Chloe grabbed his hand under the table. She was pale, but she understood what I was doing. This wasn't charity. It was a restructuring. Term 4, I continued. You will attend financial counseling together. Every week, you will submit proof of attendance. You will follow the counselor's budget recommendations to the letter. Liam let out a bitter laugh. So what? You're our babysitter now. No, I said, leaning back. I'm the person saving your necks while teaching you how not to strangle yourselves again. There's a difference. I could see the weight of it all hitting them. The public apology, the legal control, the humiliation, the structure. Liam's pride was cracking. Chloe's shoulders sagged like someone who finally understood the price tag of her choices. And if we say no? Liam asked quietly. I didn't blink. Then you lose the house, the business goes under, the bank takes what's left, and you deal with the consequences you created. I will not interfere again. Not legally, not financially, not socially. You'll be just another cautionary tale in Springfield about what happens when people think they can live on borrowed money and borrowed respect. The silence that followed was thick. Snow tapped against the kitchen window like a metronome. Chloe looked down at her trembling hands. Liam stared at the table, jaw working furiously. Finally, Chloe whispered, We accept. Liam didn't speak at first. Then, through clenched teeth, he said, "We accept your terms." I nodded once. No smile, no gloating. Just the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd spent weeks turning the wheel and had finally brought the ship to heel. "Good," I said. "The apology letter is due tomorrow. Once it's published and signed, we'll proceed with the legal paperwork. I'll have Richard draw it up." As they stood to leave, I added, "One more thing. You should know this isn't forgiveness. Forgiveness is earned, not given in advance. What this is accountability. Don't mistake the two." They left silently, their footprints trailing through the fresh snow, like a pair of children walking home after detention. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it for a moment, letting out a slow breath. Walter's photo hung on the wall by the staircase. I glanced at it and whispered, "You'd have liked that part." For the first time in weeks, the house felt warm again. The next morning, the neighborhood was blanketed in soft white snow. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound sharp. When my email pinged at 8:04 a.m., I knew what it was before I even opened it. Subject line, "Apology draft, please review." It was from Chloe. The tone was careful, formal. I opened the attached document and began to read. "We, Chloe Sanders and Liam Walker, wish to acknowledge and apologize for the way we treated our grandmother, Joanne Walker, following the passing of her husband Walter. Our actions were disrespectful, insensitive, and wrong. We allowed our financial struggles to cloud our judgment, and in doing so, we deeply hurt the woman who has supported us our entire lives. Joanne has been the foundation of our family. Through her hard work, she helped build the home we live in, supported our education, and co-signed financial opportunities that made our lives possible. Instead of honoring that, we tried to take what wasn't ours. We take full responsibility for the situation we created, financially and personally. Joanne's decision to set strict terms is deserved. We have agreed to those terms and will work to regain the trust we lost. We offer our public apology to her and to our community for our behavior." I read it twice, slowly. It wasn't perfect. It was raw, a little stiff, but it was real. The most important part wasn't the wording. It was the fact that it came from them, not me. I added one comment. "Posted as written, no edits, signed by both of you." At 10:17 a.m., the post went live on both their social media accounts and was submitted to the Springfield Neighborhood newsletter, which circulated every Sunday. The reaction started within minutes. Neighbors who'd politely avoided me since Walter's funeral were suddenly leaving comments like, "This took courage. Proud of you for owning up. Joanne, you raised them right, even if they stumbled." I wasn't looking for sympathy, but make no mistake, Springfield is a small town. Reputation is currency here. And overnight, the narrative shifted. I wasn't the old woman being moved out for her own good anymore. I was the matriarch who'd stood her ground. By Monday afternoon, Richard had the legal paperwork ready. Chloe and Liam came over that evening, subdued and punctual for the first time in months. They sat at the dining room table while Richard explained every clause. The escrow agreement that ensured the $25,000 would go directly to the mortgage company. The collateral clause that gave me legal claim to their house if they defaulted again. The monthly financial reporting requirement. The mandatory counseling attendance. Liam's jaw tightened as he initialed each section. Chloe's hands trembled, but she didn't hesitate. Every signature was another brick sealing the new foundation of our relationship, not built on blind generosity this time, but on accountability. When it was done, Richard gathered the documents into a neat stack. "It's binding," he said. "Miss a single condition, and Joanne can legally revoke the entire agreement. No loopholes." They both nodded. They'd been reduced from self-appointed power brokers to students in my classroom. As Richard left, The three of us sat in the quiet kitchen. No arguments, no pleading. Just a thick, strange silence. Chloe finally whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't loud, but it was the first genuine thing she'd said to me in a long time. Liam stayed quiet, staring down at the table. I didn't expect a thank you from him, not yet. The next day, the mortgage company received the escrow payment. Chloe texted me a photo of the confirmation email. Just one line followed, "We'll keep our end." Later that week, the apology letter appeared in the Sunday newsletter. There it was, printed on the front page under the headline, "Local Family Takes Accountability." Springfield isn't a big place. People read it. People talked. At the grocery store, Mrs. Hensley from 2 doors down stopped me in the canned goods aisle. "Joanne," she whispered, leaning close, "you handled that beautifully. I wish I'd had your backbone when my kids tried to sell my lake cabin." I smiled politely and moved on, but inside, something warm stirred. Not gloating, not triumph, just quiet satisfaction. For weeks, they'd underestimated me, and now they'd had to tell the world who I really was. Chloe and Liam started attending financial counseling the following week. I didn't go with them, but the counselor emailed monthly summaries. It was clear. Their lifestyle was changing. No more luxury car payments, no more fancy vacations. Liam took on contract work under another firm to rebuild his credibility. Chloe picked up part-time work at a clinic to keep the mortgage afloat. The $25,000 wasn't a miracle fix. It was a lifeline tied to hard labor, and the community watched it all happen. Neighbors who once pitied them now nodded knowingly. They learned. That was the unspoken verdict. One evening, as I sat in Walter's armchair sipping tea, Chloe came by alone. No makeup, no pleading, just quiet. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Grandma, thank you for not walking away when you had every reason to. I can't change what we said that night, but I can change what happens from now on. Chloe." For the first time since Walter's funeral, I felt the tightness in my chest ease a little. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into Walter's old toolbox in the hall closet, the place he kept things worth fixing. The revenge wasn't over yet, but the balance had shifted completely. By late January, the snow along the streets had hardened into gray banks, pushed aside by plows. The neighborhood had returned to its usual rhythm: morning commutes, kids trudging to school in puffy coats, porch lights blinking on at dusk. But inside my house, something had changed. For the first time in months, there was no pit in my stomach when I passed the dining room, no bitterness when I stood by the window at night. I'd spent weeks pruning the overgrown vines of entitlement and arrogance that had wrapped around this family like weeds. Now, the air inside was clear. One Tuesday afternoon, I heard the sound of scraping outside. Through the window, I saw Liam shoveling my walkway. Not his, mine. Head down, no fanfare, just steady work. He didn't notice me watching. There was no smug grin, no performative gestures, just quiet effort. The following Saturday, Chloe came over with a stack of paperwork from her financial counseling sessions. She sat at the kitchen table, Walter's chair empty as always, and explained their new budget line by line. No excuses, no pleading, just the facts. She even brought homemade banana bread. She used to do that as a teenager when she needed help with math homework. It was almost disarming, but not enough to make me forget. Trust isn't rebuilt with banana bread. It's rebuilt with time and consistency. The community's reaction to the apology letter had spread like ripples through a pond. At church, people greeted me differently. With respect, quiet nods. No more sympathetic head tilts or whispered, "I heard she's moving soon." Now they saw me as the woman who'd held her ground when her own blood turned on her. And Chloe and Liam felt it too. You could tell by the way they lowered their voices in the grocery store when neighbors approached, or the careful way Liam spoke during town meetings when Riverbend Contracting's name came up. Their reputations weren't ruined, but they'd been humbled, publicly. Mid-February, the mortgage company sent a formal letter, account current, foreclosure process withdrawn. They'd made their first 2 payments on time, no delays, no excuses. The counselor's reports showed clear, cautious progress. Chloe had downsized their car. Liam had taken on subcontracting work and was finally paying down his debts, slowly, methodically. And me? I'd stopped waiting for an apology I'd never get from Liam. I already had something better, his actions changing. That was enough. One evening, I sat alone in the living room with a cup of tea, staring at Walter's photograph above the mantel. He was smiling in that easy way of his, one arm around me, the other holding the blueprints to this house. He'd designed the porch himself. Every corner of this place carried his touch, and they'd tried to take it from me like it was a line item in their budget. "I handled it, Walt," I whispered, "systematically. Just like you taught me to fix things, step by step." The house creaked softly in the cold, like it was listening. I didn't throw them out. I didn't drag them through court. I didn't scream. I just watched, waited. Pulled the right threads at the right time until their own web collapsed around them. And when they crawled back, I didn't give them mercy. I gave them structure. That was my revenge, not fury, not spectacle, control. And the best part? They handed it to me willingly. A month later, I hosted Sunday dinner for the first time since Walter's passing. Nothing extravagant, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, his favorite apple pie. Chloe set the table. Liam carved the meat. The grandkids, younger ones, chased each other through the hallway laughing, oblivious to the storm that had nearly torn their family apart. As I sat at the head of the table, watching them eat, I felt a strange, steady calm. Not forgiveness, not yet, but stability. The house was still mine, the legacy was still intact, and they finally understood who they were dealing with. Chloe caught my eye from across the table. For a moment, she looked like the little girl sitting cross-legged on the porch, listening to Walter tell stories. Her eyes softened. She mouthed, "Thank you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence between us now wasn't cold. It was understood. After everyone left, I walked through the quiet house, checking the locks the way Walter used to. In the study, the stack of loan documents, foreclosure notices, and legal papers sat neatly in a labeled box, resolved. I slid the box onto the top shelf of the closet, not out of bitterness, out of completeness. This chapter was closed. Before bed, I stood on the porch, wrapped in Walter's old coat. The snow had started again, light and silent. Across the street, Chloe and Liam's house glowed faintly through the trees. They were still there. They hadn't lost it, but they'd lost the illusion that it was theirs by right. They'd learned something. So had I. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's the steady turning of a wheel until the balance shifts. Sometimes it's simply refusing to move when others try to push you out. Walter's wind chime tinkled softly above the porch. The house was warm behind me, my house. And for the first time since he died, I closed the door with a smile,